Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for joining us. Today we've got a brand new story to share with you. So let's begin. Mark weighed 325 pounds and he and Sarah had lost a couple of friends from heart attacks recently. She became worried about Mark and to make a long story short, she cut him off from sex for all but 4 times a year unless he achieved weight loss goals. The 4 times were Valentine's Day, their anniversary, and both of their birthdays. Mark proceeded to lose a bunch of weight over a 2-year period and cashed in on the extra sex along the way as step goals were met but was pretty much deprived of sex. He lost a huge amount of weight and got down to around 207 pounds and at that point he wanted to quit. After all, he had lost 118 pounds and it was just so tough. When Mark said he wanted to quit, Sarah said no way Buster. That is when she made her threat, the threat that inspired this story. If you quit, you will only be getting sex the 4 times a year. I have sexual needs, so even though you will only be getting sex 4 times a year, I will have to get my needs taken care of somewhere else. In the moments after Sarah made that threat, she saw the foundation of her marriage shake. It started shaking when Mark's head snapped up and he looked her in the eyes with a look of total shock and confusion. She saw the foundation of her marriage crack as she saw the sadness sweep over him and the hurt was evident in his eyes. All the result of what she had said. She saw the foundation of her marriage begin to crumble around her feet as his sadness and hurt morphed into anger and disgust. She knew then and there that she had made a critical mistake. Sarah had pushed this man she loved dearly to the limits to fulfill her desires that he lose all that weight, and then she had threatened to have sex with others to punish him for not meeting her goals. How could she be so stupid? How could she have done that to him? Mark was pissed. He said, I have busted my ass for 2 years to lose over 100 pounds to please you, Sarah. It has been difficult for me beyond belief and during the time you have withheld sex. For me as a tool to get me to go on. I did it all for you, Sarah, because I love you and wanted to please you. Now when I don't feel I can continue, you reward me by telling me that you will continue to cut me off and in fact get your needs met elsewhere by going out and cheating on me. You may not know it yet, Sarah, but you have just ruined our marriage. You have thrown the gorilla out into the middle of our home, and now I don't know if it will ever be caged again. You obviously have had thoughts of having sex with other men, or you couldn't have come up with your ultimatum so quickly. How do you expect me to trust you now? Have you been having sex all along to meet your needs during this whole 2 years? Damn you, Sarah. Damn you. I don't know what to believe anymore about our marriage. Man, you have just ruined it, that is all I can say. Sarah said, Mark, I didn't mean it. I never would have had sex with someone else. Please, Mark, I didn't mean it. Mark just looked at her in disgust, and how am I supposed to really believe anything you say now? You seemed pretty serious a few minutes ago. Mark got up from the kitchen table and headed out the back door into the garage. I have to have some time to think. The tears started flowing down Sarah's face as she lost it. She sat there sobbing because she knew he was right. A seed of doubt had been planted in his mind and it wasn't going to be easy to make it go away. Sometimes things are said without thinking, and that is what happened here. Sarah just didn't think how it would affect Mark. She was so proud of him for what he had accomplished, but she had gotten greedy and wanted more. She thought it was for me. He did so much for me already, but I was greedy and wanted more, and now I am going to have to win back what I have lost. Mark rummaged around out in the garage for about an hour. There wasn't anything in particular that he was doing. Just keeping his hands busy while he thought things through. Mark didn't really think his wife had cheated on him over the last 2 years, but he wasn't sure. Earlier in the day he would have been sure, but now after her comment he just couldn't be sure anymore. He didn't know either if she would have cheated on him in the future earlier. He would have never believed it, but now he wasn't sure anymore. He said out loud, I need to find out. Mark walked back in the house. Sarah was still sitting at the kitchen table looking like hell. Her eyes were red from crying and her nose was red too. Mark noticed and felt bad, but he was determined to follow through on what he had decided. Sarah, here is what is going to happen. I am quitting the diet right now. You don't need to worry about cutting me off from sex with you because I am cutting you off. We can have sex the same 4 times a year that you dictated before if you want. If you want to skip it all together, that is fine too. I don't care. You do what you have to do. Let me tell you, however, that if you choose to have sex with someone other than me, you won't like the results when I find out, and I will find out. Your lover will have his balls kicked up into his ass and stomped into pulp. I am sure I will be breaking a few of his ribs and for sure his nose. I am certain that his eyes will be swollen shut before I am done, so he won't be looking lovingly on you in the future, and depending on how I am feeling at the time it might even be worse. Ask for you. If you cheat on me, I will kick your bum to the curb so fast you won't know what hit you. You will be a free woman able to get your needs met anytime and any place you want. I would never stay married to a cheating 300 and for so make your own bed their sweetheart, and just so you know I am going to be watching your every move from here on forward. I don't trust you anymore, so you would better be really careful in everything you do. You won't be able to be careful enough though to keep me from finding out if you cheat. I am going out for a while. I won't be home for lunch, but I will be here for dinner. If you don't feel like cooking, that is okay. We can order a pizza or some Chinese takeout if you don't cook. Mark grabbed his car keys off the counter and walked out the back door into the garage. Moments later, Sarah heard the garage door open, and she heard Mark's car drive away. Sarah said out loud, "Oh my God, I can't believe this. How could I be so stupid?" She began sobbing again and just sat there wishing she had kept her mouth shut. An hour or so later, she got up to go to the bathroom, then went and lay on her bed and cried some more. When Mark arrived home later that afternoon, he found her in the exact same position. Like so many husbands who suspected his wife of cheating, Mark decided to do some detective work on his own. He thought the easiest way to start was to drive to the telephone providers and request a printout of call logs on their home phone and on his wife's cell phone. Before in his name, so he knew he would not be having any trouble getting the reports. The landline phone company told him he could have it electronically, and they were able to upload the call logs for the last 3 years onto a CD for him for a small fee. He gladly paid it and walked out of the office with everything he asked for. Yes, he requested 3 years because he wanted to be able to go back before he had started the diet to see if there had been any motivation for Sarah cutting him off in the first place. He went to the cell phone company and requested identical data. They hesitated at first since it was his wife's cell phone number he wanted the data for. But Mark pointed out that indeed it was a joint account with his name prominently on the records, so they had no reason to withhold any information he might request. They offered the data electronically as well for a fee of $20. Mark thought it excessive but probably worth the money so he could more easily access the information. He did make a note, though, that perhaps he would rethink his cell phone provider in the future. Arriving at home around 4 p.m., Mark saw Sarah laying on their bed sound asleep. He decided to let her sleep and went back to their home office. Locking the office door so he would not be interrupted, he sat down at the computer and downloaded all of the data from the 2 CDs into a folder in his documents file. He had already formulated how he would conduct his search. He was going to start with 2 years ago and compile a list of every telephone number called in that first month when he started his diet and when Sarah had restricted his sex to 4 times a year plus rewards for goals achieved. That would have been September of 2008. On their home phone, September had 96 calls to 19 different numbers. He found that using the format the phone company had provided for him, he could sort the data in a number of different ways, so he created a list by numbers showing the number, the date, the time, and the duration of the call. Just he got the system figured out, it took him about an hour and a half to create that list for every call made from their home phone in the last 2 years. He was just about ready to start the same process on Sarah's cell phone data when he heard the office door knob rattle. The door was locked so no one could come in, so he saved everything he had been doing and stashed away all evidence of what he had been doing. He logged off the computer and went and opened a door to find the most pitiful sight he could imagine. He twisted Sarah in a seriously disheveled state. Here a mess, eyes and nose read from, her crying and sniffling every once in a while. She had her head bent down and only reluctantly looked up and into Mark's eyes. She said, "Mark, I am so sorry for what I have done to you. I know you are hurt and angry with me, and I know I was selfish and cruel to do and say what I have to you. Please forgive me. I know you had accomplished wonderful results on your diet and I should have had no say in whether you continued or not. It was for you to decide, but I guess I just felt the power of it all and got carried away. Please forgive me." Mark replied, "Sarah, I forgive you for now, but only because I know nothing more. I love you and I lost all of the weight I did for you. I struggled with it for 2 years and gave up the sex during the time all for you in the first place. I just couldn't do it anymore. Unfortunately, as I said, the gorilla is in the room now and I have to know without a doubt whether or not you are a cheater or it will drive me crazy. So if you have not cheated on me in the past and do not cheat on me in the future, we should be okay. But I have to know, so until I feel confident, you are just going to have to deal with it. I didn't create this mess. You did with your quick comment and threat. I can't imagine how you thought I might react to that, but obviously you never considered how it would make me feel or how it would damage my trust in you, or you wouldn't have said what you did. Sarah was hoping Mark would just forgive her and forget what she had said, but that was not to be. She thought, I suppose I deserved everything that was happening to me, but I hoped it could all go away. She nodded her head slowly and resigned agreement and turned and walked objectively back to the bedroom and closed the door behind her. She lay on her bed again, not sobbing but with tears streaking her face. Mark opened the bedroom door and asked, Sarah, do you want something to eat? Sarah said, no, Mark. I am not hungry. Mark walked out to his car and drove off again to a place nearby called Grisham's. He and Sarah had gone there for drinks many times and their food was excellent. He knew he could have a few beers and a greasy but delicious bacon cheeseburger. In the 2 years previous, he had not had more than 2 beers in a week's time and not 1 bacon cheeseburger. Tonight he was going to give in and have what he wanted. He knew that he would never allow himself to get overweight like he had been before, but tonight he was going to splurge and enjoy his dinner even though his heart was breaking. It was breaking for his wife because he hated seeing her like she was now, but it was also breaking from the hurt and distrust she had laid upon him. When he got home, he went back to the office and began working on the call log from Sarah's cell phone. Because he already knew the drill, it was easier to finish the cell phone list, and he was done in half the time. After reviewing the 2 lists, Mark determined that over the course of 2 years they had 3482 calls made in total from a total of 45 different telephone numbers. He decided to sort the calls by telephone number and had some surprising results. There were almost 300 calls to his cell phone, about 200 calls to his parents' number, and a similar numbers of calls to Sarah's parents' number. There were close to that many to each of Sarah's sisters and about half that number to his brother John. In addition, there was a scattering of calls to various friends who Mark recognized the numbers, and a few to other numbers he didn't recognize. Going down the list, though, he discovered that there were over 200 calls to a number he didn't recognize and another 50-plus calls to a second number he didn't recognize. Then he realized there were some calls 30 or more to additional numbers that were made over the course of 2 years. He assumed those might be hair salon stores, church, etc. None of those statistics bothered Mark much, so he just noted them and went back to the 2 major unrecognizable numbers. Following the type of guy Mark was, he decided to refine his research a little more and sorted the calls by day and time for those 2 numbers. The surprising results gave him the chills, and almost immediately he was burning up with suspicion and anger. Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Mark went to a staff meeting with his boss and other department heads to a local restaurant with meeting rooms. They met in conference for an hour, took a 1-hour lunch break, and finished their business by 2:30 p.m. or 3 p.m. without fail. Every week, there was a call to him on his cell phone at 10:55 a.m. Every week he worked. Yes, there were some weeks that were missed, and Mark instantly knew it was when he was on vacation. But every Wednesday at 10:55 a.m. was the rule. At 11:05 a.m. every Wednesday there was a call made to the first of the 2 numbers Mark didn't recognize. Oh yeah, he was burning up now. Too much of a coincidence to not be suspicious. He knew at that moment that what he was going to find would not make him too happy. For severing, he looked at the second number and quickly realized that those calls were all placed on Friday at 1:05 p.m. One Friday afternoon a month, Mark played golf with his brother and each of their best friends. They played 18 holes, which took them until about 5:30 p.m. and stopped in the clubhouse for a couple of drinks before heading home. He was almost always home before 6:30 p.m. on those Fridays. He would shower and take Sarah out to eat. What pissed him off was that Sarah always called him just before he teed off to tell him She loved him and that she would be waiting for him when he finished his round and got home. He knew what was going on now, but as yet he didn't have visual proof or know with whom she was cheating on him with. The scary part now was that he wondered how long it had gone on and if it just started when Sarah cut him off or if it had started sooner. So he went back the additional year and discovered that the same calls were made once a month for the 3 months prior to his being cut off. For Sarah she was doing it for 3 months earlier, but not as often. All he had to do now was figure out who and then decide what he was going to do about it. He thought finding out who would be easy. He ran a reverse lookup on the first number and discovered that it was a cell phone number and not listed. He ran the reverse lookup on the second number and found that it was listed to a Tony Batali. Of course, Mark knew exactly who Tony Batali was. He was Mark's trainer at the gym. Sarah had found him for Mark in the first place. So Sarah was calling Tony on the Fridays when I golf. Mark thought. He noted the address in his call log spreadsheet and decided to go out again for a while. When he got back to Grisham's, he sat and had a couple of more beers. When things began to quiet down a bit after the dinner rush, Mark asked the rather attractive bartender Brenda if she would do something to help him. He explained a little bit about what happened and told her he just wanted to find out if the first number was Tony's cell phone number. He dialed the number and told Brenda just ask to speak with Tony, and if it is him, just tell him some woman gave you the number as a possible trainer. He told her if it is him, tell him that if he has openings you will stop and see him at the gym one of these days. Brenda took the phone. Hello, is this Tony? She asked. My name is Jennifer. Yes. Some woman who came into my hair salon gave me your name as a possible trainer. No, I didn't know her at all, but we were talking about getting in better shape and she gave me your name. Definitely. Yes. I am 24. I am 5 feet 6 inches tall and right now I am a little chunky. I weigh about 130 pounds. I almost feel like you're checking me out over the phone. I know I could tone up a bit and be happier than I am now if I was at 115 pounds or so, but I do look okay. Thank you very much. Do you have any openings? I see. One of your clients has recently decided to call it quits and you have an opening. Great. I'm hoping to see you in a couple of days and we can work out what I need to do to get the job done. Thanks, Tony. I will see you soon. Mark was sitting there in amazement at what Brenda just did. She verified that it was Tony from the gym and discovered that indeed he did hit on women that used him for a trainer. She even verified that he had an opening because of a dropout. Mark thought that dropout had to be me. Damn. Sarah already called Tony to tell him what happened and to warn him to be ultra careful. The funny thing though, as he sat there feeling lower than dirt, was the humor in what Brenda had said. He didn't know or care how much she actually waved. She was hot just like she was. She didn't need to lose an ounce anywhere. Mark smiled at her and told her she was too funny and that he thought she was perfect. The way she was, so she better stay away from Tony. He said, no one could have a more perfect body than you do, Brenda. Brenda flashed in the most beautiful smile and said, thank you, kind sir. Your flattery makes me blush. Honestly, Mark, you were such a hunk, I can't understand why your wife would have looked elsewhere. Any girl would be lucky to have you as a friend and lover. Mark smiled himself. Well, Brenda, 2 years ago I wasn't a hunk as you put it, but it still doesn't justify her cheating on me. I thank you for your help and I would love to stay and talk, but I think I'd better get home. I really appreciate what you have done for me, both to find out the information about Tony and to boost my deflated ego too. Thanks. Mark went home and because it was late he just went to bed. As he crawled into bed, he looked across at Sarah and was hit with a feeling of loss and disappointment. He didn't think he had ever been this low in his life, but he was also certain that before it was all over he would feel even worse. Sarah had awakened slightly when he crawled in and said, I love you, Mark. Mark just grunted at that and turned away from her and tried to sleep. Of course, he couldn't get to sleep right away and just lay there thinking for quite a while. He was certain that he heard a sob or two from Sarah, but she obviously had calmed down somewhat. In the morning, he woke up and Sarah was spooned against him. He could feel her body pressing into his back and it made his morning even stiffer. When she realized that Mark had woken up, she reached around him and put her hand on his stiff tool. Mark, Please forgive me for what I said and make love to me. Mark knew he was a goner if he stayed in that bed. He never could resist Sarah, and he just knew that he would give in if he stayed there, and she worked her magic on him. As resolve held, and he said, "No, Sarah. I need to get going this morning, and there isn't time. Furthermore, I told you that you were cut off, and that is how it is going to be, so don't try that again." Mark got out of bed, showered, and left for work. Sarah said to herself, "Mark, I know I deserve this for what I said, but it hurts too much." When Mark got to work, he mentioned to his boss that he was having a bit of a problem at home. He briefly explained it to his boss and was told to take any time off he needed to follow through on his suspicions. His boss also gave Mark the name of a top-notch electronics distributor that could hook him up with some surveillance equipment. Thanks for listening. This story isn't over yet, and things are about to get even more intense. Stay tuned for the next part to see what happens next.